This is Mikhail Khodorkovsky. He's the CEO of the Russian oil company Yukos and Russia's richest man. And right now, he's at a meeting with the country's other oligarchs and President Vladimir Putin. It's late February 2003. Khodorkovsky's been asked to say a few words about corruption, something that's plagued Russia for decades. But instead of doing what you'd usually do, perhaps blame a few customs officials or a greedy mayor somewhere far from Moscow, he did something else. Something that will cost him everything. He's just accused the president of enabling corruption at the very top of the Russian government on live television. He did so by bringing up a recent oil deal where the state-owned company, Rosneft, bought a small private firm for far more than it was worth as a way to transfer public money to high-ranking officials inside the Kremlin. And now Putin is furious. Just recently, your company ran into some tax issues, he says, referring to Khodorkovsky's company Yukos, and a rather shady tax issue they managed to sort out with the Russian government. A bribe. And suddenly, Khodorkovsky's the one being accused of corruption by Putin. Russia's richest man has unknowingly made himself a target for Russia's most powerful man. And he doesn't miss. In the months following, Khodorkovsky and Yukos suddenly start to feel pressure from authorities. It doesn't take long for several Yukos-related companies to come under investigation. And one by one, Khodorkovsky's closest allies are arrested and their apartments and offices are raided. Naturally, Khodorkovsky's friends and advisors beg him to get out of Russia before it's too late, but he refuses to flee. His company Yukos is in early talks to sell a major stake to the American oil giant ExxonMobil. If it goes through, an American company could gain significant influence over one of Russia's largest oil producers. For Putin, that would be a disaster. At around 5 a.m. in late October 2003, Khodorkovsky's private jet lands in Novosibirsk to refuel during one of his many business trips. Suddenly, the tower informs the pilots that they've been selected for a routine check. They'll need to board the plane for inspection before they can take off. They're then directed to a remote stand away from the main terminal building and told to wait. Then, 3 men dressed in airport security uniforms board the aircraft and move through the cockpit, inspecting the front section of the plane. Just as they're about to leave, the sound of heavy footsteps can be heard from outside. Masked men, armed with automatic weapons, are standing directly in front of the cabin door. And Khodorkovsky knows who they are. Spetsnaz, the most dangerous special forces unit of the FSB. And they're here for him. That same day, Khodorkovsky is flown to Moscow and placed before a judge. As the charges are read, massive fraud, forgery, embezzlement, tax evasion and contempt of court, he simply smiles in disbelief. The court claims his crimes have cost Russia over $1 billion and orders him imprisoned while investigations continue. The prison is notoriously brutal and overcrowded, and many of the inmates suffer from tuberculosis. 8 months later, the trial begins. Khodorkovsky and his business partner are placed inside a cage in the middle of the courtroom. It doesn't take long for them to realise the trial won't be fair, as the judge blocks key witnesses while the prosecution is allowed to present flawed and withheld evidence. And sure enough, a year later, both men are found guilty of large-scale fraud and tax evasion and sentenced to 9 years in prison. At the same time, his company Yukos is hit with massive tax claims while the state takes control of their assets and their most important oil fields are sold to Rosneft. Khodorkovsky is sent to a remote penal colony in northern Russia under strict surveillance and with very limited contact with the outside world. Then, in 2007, Just as he's nearing parole, new charges are filed, and 2 years later, he's sentenced to a further 14 years in prison. From being Russia's richest man on the verge of closing a deal with one of the world's largest oil companies, Khodorkovsky has lost a $15 billion fortune, his company, and his freedom in less than 2 years. And with more charges likely to come, the chance of him ever being released are almost zero. But then, in 2013, rumours suddenly start to spread that Putin has new plans for Khodorkovsky. As for Khodorkovsky, I've already talked about this. A decree for his pardon will be signed soon. Out of seemingly nowhere after his annual end-of-year press conference, Putin suddenly announces that Khodorkovsky will be pardoned. Completely. As host of the upcoming Winter Olympics, Russia has suddenly found itself under pressure over its human rights record. And so, according to insiders in the Kremlin, Putin has decided to release notable political prisoners, including Khodorkovsky. And sure enough, a few days before Christmas, Khodorkovsky is released from his prison camp in Segedja. After having served more than 10 years in some of Russia's most brutal labour camps, he's free. Khodorkovsky was one of the first oligarchs to challenge Putin publicly, but he also benefited from exploiting the same system he later criticised. And it's probably fair to assume that had it not been for his usefulness to gain goodwill, chances are he'd still be in prison. Today, he lives in exile and remains a prominent critic of Putin and the authoritarian regime in Russia. In recent years, he's funded independent news outlets, backed exiled opposition figures, and helped other Russians fleeing political persecution. One day, he hopes to return to Russia when it's safe and free.